Welcome back to Exploring Psychology Through Science Fiction. This week we're going to be talking about memory, learning, and technology integration. This first lecture is going to focus on memory. Some of you may have had courses on this before, and for others this may be new. So we're just going to briefly review some of the main points about what we know in regard to memory. There's really three stages or three processes in the formation of a memory, and those are encoding, storage, and retrieval. And first I want you to watch a short video that does a great job explaining this, although they talk really fast, so you may have to rewind a couple of times, but this gives a really good overview of the memory processes.
Memory is the sum of what we remember and plays a big role in our life. You remember how to drive a car. You remember how to tie your shoes or unbutton your jacket. Procedural memory allows you to remember how to do things and perform your skills. But you can also remember your favorite song, recognize the face of your friends, and the taste of that carrot cake. Declarative memory is responsible for storing past events and acquired knowledge, and it is going to be the main character for the next minutes. The three main processes involved in human memory are encoding, storage, and retrieval. Encoding is the term used for the various processes by which information is transformed into a memory representation. Encoding begins with perception, which is a conversion of a sensory stimulus into electrical impulses that travel through the neurons to the sensory areas of the cortex. Thus, visual, auditory, tactile, and olfactory stimuli are decoded into respective sensory area, whereas sensory input with a particular meaning, such as spoken language, is decoded in Wernicke's area. Therefore, sensory memory retains these impressions, although it decays in less than a second. To deal with the huge amount of information around us, attention prioritizes elements that should be processed, ignoring the others, acting like a cognitive filter. These sensory memories are then combined in the hippocampus into one single experience, comparing and associating it with previously recorded ones. The hippocampus not only receives but also sends connection to the cortex, assembling a neuronal network which operates as a kind of hologram. At this point, two main models have been proposed to explain the functioning of short-term memory, the multi-store model and the working memory model. The multi-store model, proposed by Atkinson and Shiffrin in 1968, is built on the idea of three memory stores and identifies memory as a flow of information through the system. Short-term memory holds a small amount of information in a readily available state for a short period of time, and can be transferred to the long-term storage only if it's mentally repeated, which is known as rehearsal. However, this model has been considered too simplistic, and in 1974, Patley and Hitch proposed the working memory model, where the short-term storage is replaced by three components. The central executive, who acts like a company boss, making decisions about which issues deserve attention, controlling and integrating information from its two assistants. The phonological loop, which is linked to speech perception and production, and retains words in mind for 1 to 2 seconds by using rehearsal like replaying a tape. And the visuospatial scratchpad, which stores visual information and allows us to manipulate images in our head. In 2000, the episodic buffer was added to the model to coordinate information across domains, ordering it chronologically and associating it with the long-term memory. Once stimuli have been encoded into memories, they must be stored permanently, and the first step to accomplish it is consolidation. It is divided in two different processes: synaptic consolidation and system consolidation. In synaptic consolidation, as neuronal pathways are traversed over and over again, their structure is modified, facilitating the neuronal transmission like a path over a field is cleared as trekkers pass through it. In systemic consolidation, the hippocampal cortical network strengthens its corticocortical connections and establishes new ones, allowing them to become hippocampus independent. These permanent memories constitute our long-term memory, which, in contrast to the popular view, it is not stored just in one part of the brain, but each component of memory is stored where it was originally encoded. The human brain can store almost unlimited amounts of information indefinitely. However, forgetting can occur as a result from incorrectly or incompletely encoded memories and/or problems with the retrieval process. Moreover, some authors hold that long-term memories do actually decay and disappear completely over time. All of these processes are very important, but they are meaningless without retrieval, which is the possibility to reaccess all the memories stored, what is known as remembering. During retrieval, the brain replaces the original pattern formed during encoding mixed with an awareness of the current situation, returning a memory from long-term storage to short-term memory, where it becomes labeled and modifiable. There are two main methods of accessing memory: recall and recognition. Recall involves voluntarily remembering a fact, event, or stimulus that is not currently physically present by actively reconstructing the information. This happens, for instance, when you recreate your last weekend during a conversation with a friend. In contrast, recognition is an unconscious process that associates an event or stimulus with one previously experienced, involving just the process of comparison. This occurs when the taste of a cake or a song from the radio make you remember that first day. In sum, this is how memory works. Now, perhaps, you may realize how essential memory is, tying your past with your present, providing a framework for the future, and constituting a key aspect of your personal identity.
Now, just to touch on a few things that were covered in that video. The first process is encoding. This is how we pull information from the environment through our senses and become aware of it. Now this takes attention, focus, and concentration. So people that struggle with ADHD aren't able to direct their focus on things for very long, and this affects how well they can learn because they can't incorporate all that they perceive into memories that they can then again retrieve. The majority of memory, we believe, is based on acoustic and semantic processes. So acoustic is actually hearing a sound, but this also works for rehearsal. So when I'm trying to remember something and keep it in short-term memory long enough to get it over to long-term memory, I may sit there and repeat it. So if I've got to look up a phone number and then switch over and dial it in, I'm going to repeat those numbers over and over. And even if I'm just repeating it to myself, not out loud, that's still considered acoustic. Our brain still treats it the same way. And then the other main aspect for encoding memories is semantic, or the meaning of something, or how it's applied to a particular context. So this is really how we get memories to stay in long-term memory, is by giving it meaning. So if I'm learning new words, I think about synonyms, I give the definition. I'm trying to apply meaning to what I'm learning. But memories can also be based on visuospatial, so what we see as well as where it's at in the environment. It may be based on location, so I may remember something based on being in my classroom or being in my car. And then we can also get memories based on touch, smell, and taste. And smell and taste can be especially strong, especially when they're tied in with emotions, and can really serve as triggers to remember something. Now, to get from encoding to long-term memory, that information has to be consolidated. And what that means is that it has to kind of be locked in. You have to, if we were talking about computers, it'd be writing it to the hard drive. You've got to make those connections stick. And there's two ways that that's done. One is based on long-term potentiation, which is where the neurons that make up that particular path for that memory get strengthened. And so they fire more quickly. There's more dendrites and synapses wired in together for a really strong connection. And then there's also a systemic consolidation, which is where the hippocampus gets bypassed, and it's just, again, based more on the neuronal connections, so that it doesn't have to use as many resources. Once we get into storage, There's several different types of long-term memory. Uh, they are broken into procedural, which is how to do things. So riding a bike, blowing a bubble with gum, um, chopping up celery, whatever. It's how to do something. And then the other type is declarative memory, and this is more informational. It's facts, data, events. And declarative memory is then broken into two sections, episodic, which is our personal experiences, and semantic, which is just basic factual information, such as the capitals of the states, or how many letters are in the alphabet, as opposed to the episodic, which is what I ate for breakfast, or what my kids look like. Now let's apply that to, let's finally get around to the science fiction, shall we? There are lots of science fiction movies that take on the idea of memories and what can be done with that. The Matrix gives us new procedural memories. Neo gets downloaded how to do kung fu. Um, they can just download new procedural information and be able to fly a helicopter when they've never done that before. In Total Recall, we see new episodic memories. And I'm referring to the original one, which I thought the storyline was better. Arnold Schwarzenegger has had a whole new set of memories implanted in him, so that he thinks he has a wife, he thinks he does a certain type of job. What he remembers has all been implanted in him. If we look at Star Wars, the Force suggestions, these aren't the droids you're looking for. Obi-Wan's able to put a brand new memory into the stormtrooper's mind. Dollhouse is a great series where she gets uploaded with new memories for each new mission that she's going to do. They rent these dolls out and give them a whole new personality, all new memories. Finally, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. They erase memories that aren't pleasant for them. So all of these, and there's tons more that have all looked at what can be done when we start messing with memories. Okay, so we've talked about encoding and storage, but that's all for naught if we can't retrieve it, pull it back up. Once we've written these memories into our brain, we've got to actually be able to get them back. Now there's two basic ways that memories are retrieved. One is recall and the other is recognition. So recall is when we are asked a question or cued to pull up a specific memory, and we're able to go get that almost immediately. The human brain is amazing in how it does this. If our brains were like computers, the computer would pretty much have to scan all of the memory, everything that's been written, just looking for that answer. Whereas we're able to just go right to it. But the thing about how our memories seem to work is that they're really not frozen. It's not this snapshot that's perfectly accurate and unchangeable. New information or suggestions can become incorporated into old memories over time. So one way of looking at this is creative reimagination. We change what we remember. In doing some research in addictions, one of the things that we found was that as people got older, they would report their first age of drinking later and later. So, for example, when they were 21, they said, the first time I drank was when I was 14. When they're 25, they say, I think I was 15. When they get to be 35 or 40, it was like 16 or 17 when I first started drinking. We remember different things over time based on our beliefs, based on our understanding of the situation, just based on current things. We change our memories. The other thing to keep in mind is that different parts of memory are stored in different parts of the brain, and they're linked together by these associations and neural networks. But what that means is that some of those pathways may start to degrade sooner than others. So we may remember how we felt at a particular time, but we may not remember as many of the details anymore. Or we might remember just a particular smell associated with grandma's house, but I can't even picture her face right now. So we're able to get some and not others because a single memory isn't all stored as just a single entity. So that's recall. Recognition is more just association. We are able to be cued by something that just kind of pulls it up. It's not that we were looking for a particular memory or an answer or something like that. It's just that we see something that's been associated with a memory and it brings it up unconsciously. Now, remembering is crucial, but so is forgetting. Forgetting at this point is considered an asset, a strength that people have, as opposed to the brain failing. It allows us to keep the valuable information and discard the rest. For example, it's pretty convenient if you can remember where you parked your car each day. But if you didn't forget about the day before, that would all start to get jumbled up. What if I was trying to remember my car and I was flooded with every place I've ever parked it? That would be overwhelming and we wouldn't be able to function effectively. We've got to be able to discard old stuff or irrelevant things so that we can focus just on the crucial information. Forgetting also helps us recover from emotional trauma. We're pretty good actually at minimizing how bad things were. This is especially true when you, after you've broken up with a significant other. After a while, you start to just kind of remember the good stuff and you forget about how bad it was and why you actually broke up in the first place. We start to gloss over all the bad stuff. And again, that's to help us heal. And so it's useful. You just got to make sure you don't go drunk dialing. Now, we still have so much to learn about memory, but it's possible that nothing is actually completely forgotten. We get good at parsing through important versus unimportant. And we do know that those neural pathways degrade over time, as well as competing information will interfere with old memories. But you never know what might trigger an old memory to pop up. It's kind of that recognition that a memory might just get triggered where you couldn't have thought about it for the life of you, no matter how hard you tried. But when you're not thinking about it, and if you get that particular smell or hear a sound or see something familiar, it can pull up a memory that you've not experienced in years or decades. So we don't know what actually happens to that memory, whether it's just the pathways that get degraded and it becomes really hard to remember it, or that it actually is written over and gone for good. We just don't know yet. But we do know that strong emotions can make a memory much more permanent. So that's why you remember your first kiss, or the birth of your child, or a car wreck that you were in. Those strong emotions can really cement a memory. Another thing to consider when it comes to emotions is that depression seems to come into play here. There have been a number of studies that suggest that people with depression actually have better memories than others, or a more accurate perception of reality. So if I can much more accurately remember things and not gloss over all the pain, or spin it back so that things weren't so bad, if I really look at how things truly are, I may be more depressed. People with depression also have more trouble forgetting information. So they're not able to let go of that painful stuff. It just kind of hangs on there. So it's one of those strange things that we're still trying to figure out. But it may be that people that are depressed are just more accurately perceiving and remembering the real world. Now, the last thing I want to touch on is changing memories. I've had you read several short news articles that are talking about research articles. And these are all just examples of how memories can already currently be changed. So I know that in sci-fi they've got slick machines that can implant memories, and or you plug in and rewrite things. But there's already ways to do that now, which is fascinating. The one I want to expand on is false memories. So Elizabeth Loftus has done a ton of research in memory, and one of her most well-known areas of research is that on false memories. So this started to happen primarily back in the 80s and 90s, but there were multiple psychiatrists and therapists that unwittingly encouraged clients to remember childhood abuse that didn't actually occur. And this was done primarily through suggestion. For whatever reason, these psychiatrists and therapists were very focused on sexual abuse or childhood abuse, whether because that was their specialty or because that was an issue for them. For whatever reason, though, and we don't think that for the vast majority of these people there was any malicious intent. They weren't trying to implant these memories. It was just an artifact of how they were approaching therapy. But they were encouraging people to remember these repressed memories. And there's very little evidence for repression. It may be possible, there may be extreme cases where that happens, but if so, it's very few and far between. But there's a ton of evidence that shows how false memories can be planted. So this really isn't that contentious anymore. That it's pretty well accepted that false memories occur, and it's rather than repression. But so read about this, because it's a really good example of why therapists should be well trained and licensed, because you actually can do a lot of harm if you don't know what you're doing. Here's a few websites that I pulled a lot of this information from, and that has a lot of additional information if you want to follow up on this. Hope this was helpful, and we'll talk soon.